Hi everyone, welcome to the holiday edition of Serger Tip Clips, just in case the Christmas tree here wasn't a hint that it is the holiday edition. We sewists are always looking for fun gifts to give our friends and family that are thoughtful, useful, and not difficult or time consuming to make, especially when it's already December. So I've got three great little ideas. This is kind of a triple header Serger Tip Clip. And the first one will be rolled hem napkins. And I have a selection of 4 different ones. And I think that's kind of a fun thing to do, to kind of mix and match. As long as they all coordinate with each other, it's kind of fun to put different ones out, almost the same way as some people like to put different dishes out on their table. Before we go to the machine, there's just one other thing that I wanted to mention. You'll notice that all of these projects are flat, so they're easy to ship or mail. And this year, more than ever, that's going to be important. We can't all visit with our loved ones over the holidays the way we often do. So these are all easy to pop into an envelope or a small box and ship off. Let's go to the machine. I'm set up at the machine for a 3-thread rolled hem. So I have Serger cone thread in the right needle, upper and lower loopers. I have my stitch length on about 1.25. My cutting width I brought down to 5. And here's a little tip if you're working on a single layer of quilting weight cotton for napkins or any other type of project. I brought my differential feed setting down to the lowest because sometimes I find that if I have my differential feed on 1, because it's a lightweight single layer, it tends to draw in the edges a little bit. And by lowering your differential feed setting below 1, it will hold the edges flat and smooth. It slows down those front feed dogs just a little bit. Here's another tip that I like to use. I like to use a wash away stabilizer, and I get it, and it has to be transparent, obviously, so you can see the edge of your fabric. And I cut it a little longer than the edge of the fabric so that I can anchor it with my needle. If you start it in front of the toe of the foot, sometimes because it's slippery, the toe keeps pushing it back toward you, so it doesn't get caught underneath. So I am going to skim off just a little bit of the edge, just a tiny bit. And the reason I like to use the stabilizer for this is because it prevents any little serger stubble or those little pokies in between the stitches. So you get a really beautiful edge. So I'm just going to go along and stitch this first edge. If you don't have your thread tail caught on the cutter, it's always good to hang on to it till the needle catches the edge of the fabric. Gorgeous edge so far. Really nice. Oh, and just to give you an idea of what my tension settings are, I have my right needle and upper looper tension set on the default setting of 4, and I have my lower looper tension setting on just a little bit below 6.5. Beautiful. I'll just chain right off the edge, clip that, and what I'm going to do is I cut that stabilizer strip about 4 inches wide. So all I have to do with this so that I can continue using it, you don't have to keep cutting stabilizer and wasting it, is I'll just pull it off. And I will use it for the other 3 sides. I'll give this a press and I'll show you the finished product. Our second project is a double-sided basket liner, and I'm using 2 12-weight decorative threads for a pretty edge on this. And they're quilting weight cottons, but the double side is not only pretty when you fold it over if you want to cover things up before people sit down at the table, but also the double side helps keep everything warm if you want to serve rolls, muffins, bread, whatever warmed up. The double layer will keep them a little bit warmer. Quick and easy. Let's go to the machine and see how we do it. Before we start stitching, let's talk about the settings on our overlocker. I'm using a 3-thread narrow stitch. So I have my right needle threaded with Serger comb thread, and I have 12 weight threads in my upper looper and lower looper, and all of my tension settings are on the default setting of 4. This will give me a nice balanced stitch where the loops will meet precisely on the edge of the fabric. I have my cutting width at 7.5 and my differential feed is on 1 because I'm working on 2 quilting weight cottons and I'm on the straight of grain, so they're a nice stable grain line, so 1 should be perfect for the differential feed. I've also run off a test strip to check my stitch length. Whenever you're working with any decorative threads that are a different weight than your all-purpose threads or serger comb threads, you always want to test your stitching to make sure that the coverage on the edge is exactly the way you want it to look. And I do want nice full coverage, so my stitch length is on about 1.25, but that varies depending on the weight of the thread and the way you want it to look. So I think we're all set, and let's start stitching. I have my fabrics wrong sides together so that we'll have a really pretty double-sided basket liner, and it will look nice no matter which side you decide to put face up. And I'm just going to skim off a tiny bit of the edge, and I like to hang on to my threads in the back just so that I make sure that thread tail stays out of the way as I'm stitching along. And I'm just going to go down one edge, and I always cut my threads at the corner, so I begin and end at the edge of the fabric. Chain off and cut that. Now I'm not going to turn it 90 degrees. I'm going to do the opposite edge, and I'll show you why in just a minute. I've got both parallel edges done, and now I'm ready to go down to the 90-degree sides of this double-sided basket liner. And you'll notice I have a little piece of scrap fabric that has the exact same stitching that I used to test stitch on. That's on the back of the presser foot, and that's to keep it level. As I'm going over the stitching, it's considerably bulkier than just the 2 pieces of fabric will be, and I want to keep that presser foot level as it goes over it to get a really nice corner on this, because the stitching is on the outside and it will show. So I'm going to keep that nice and level so that it can stitch along, and let's get going on that. And I do have a beautiful start to that, and I'll show you that after we're all done stitching. Having that little piece is very similar to a hump jumper that you might be able to buy. Sometimes people call them jean jumpers also when they're going over bulky seams, but the little scrap of fabric does the same thing. Let's take a close-up look at that corner, and you can see it's nice and straight. It's a nice 90-degree angle. And next I'm going to show you how to neatly get rid of the thread tail so that you can't even see them. So I'm going to untangle these just quickly with my little double-eyed needle. It's pretty easy to do. Basically, all you have to do is find that needle thread, which is the skinniest thread, and the looper threads just come apart. So what I need to do next is I am just going to gently tie these. I don't want to make a knot that's so tight that it causes the edge of the corner to pucker. So I just want to be careful about that, and I will be right back. I've undone my thread tail so that I just have the 3 threads that are straight now. And I am going to just go over once, go over twice, just wrap it in. It's like just doing the same thing twice of tying your shoes. And I'm going to pull it just snug enough so that it's on the edge of the fabric, but I don't want to do it any tighter than that. And then I'm going to go over one more time, just like that. And I'm going to trim these thread tails. They're a little long. Just get rid of some of that length. And I like to take a double-eyed needle or a bodkin, but just definitely something with a blunt edge or end to it. Something that's rounded. I don't like to use a regular needle simply because you run the risk of the point of the needle getting caught and possibly fraying those pretty decorative threads. So what I'm doing is in here, I'm going to just go in about 1.5 inches. It doesn't have to be too long. And I'm going to put both of my decorative threads in the eye and pull those together. And then just pull those through. Let the tails come out. And then I like to make sure it's not puckered or anything. So I just kind of pull back a little bit on that. And I give what I call a snug tug. I pull it just a smidge tighter where it's coming out from under the stitching. Be careful not to snip your stitches. And then I trim it. And then once you trim it, those thread tails kind of disappear under the stitching line. And I'm just going to do the same thing with my Serger cone thread also, because I don't want to clip that tail. I like to make sure everything is secure and underneath. Our third project is a zipper bag. And this makes a fun wrapping for putting your napkins and basket liners in. And I also will show you how I did the tassel with 2 8-weight threads, and it's just beautiful. It's very festive. But remember, all of these projects don't have to necessarily be made with holiday fabric. You can make them with any everyday types of fabrics or theme fabrics, whatever you want, or whatever the recipient likes to see. And if you know what their color scheme is at home, great. You can make a coordinate with that too. So this is using a specialty foot, a piping foot. So if you haven't used one before, you're going to see how great it is for using, for inserting a zipper on your serger. I'll bet you didn't think you could do that either, did you? Let's take a look at what we'll need to construct the bag. I've quilted 2 pieces of fabric together with a low loft, double-sided fusible batting in between. But if you have a fabric that's fairly strong and sturdy and you don't want to quilt it to anything, or you've purchased a pre-quilted fabric, that'll work fine too. So I cut the fabric in half because I wanted the chevron effect on it. And it measures about 25.5 inches long by about 12.5 inches wide. So when it's put together, it will make about a 12-inch square bag. And I really kind of like the way it looks when it's chevroned also. So, and also I have a 20-inch zipper. It's longer, obviously, than the width of the edge to which it's going to be attached by about 8 inches. But as long as your zipper is at least 4 inches longer than the edge to which it's being attached, that will work just fine. So I am going to set up my machine for a 4-thread overlock, and I'll see you there in just a minute. Before I snap the foot on the machine, I just want to show you a little bit of the anatomy of it and why it's the perfect foot for this particular technique. This is the L16 5mm piping foot, and it's clear, which makes it great for being able to see exactly what I'm doing. And you can see, let me just make sure I hold this up correctly, that there is a little channel on the bottom edge of the foot, and that allows me to get perfectly even stitching because the zipper teeth will ride right along it smoothly, and my stitching will stay straight and perfect from one end of the zipper to the other. So I'm going to snap this on, and I'll be back in just a minute. I'm all set up for a 4-thread overlock, and I've narrowed down the stitch just a little bit. I have my cutting width on 5. I have all of my tensions on the default setting of 4 for a balanced stitch, and my stitch length is about 2.5, and I've tested it and that works well. So I'm going to put the fabric right side up. I think first I'll get my zipper tape under here, and since I've got a lot of length, I don't have to worry about where I start on it. So I've got my teeth in, and you can see I've got it upside down with the right side on the underside. And I am going to just put my fabric edge even with the zipper tape. Now, again, this is a great reason for having that longer zipper length. I can start stitching anywhere on it. I don't have to start right at the edge of the fabric itself. But I'm just going to make sure that my fabric is even with the zipper tape. And I'm going to start stitching along. And you can see the knife is cutting off just a little bit of the zipper tape and just a smidge of the fabric as I go along. And I stitch right off the fabric and then just swing my zipper off to the left and chain off. And I cut my stitch, and let's take a look at what that looks like. Perfect. Really nice. So now I'm ready to do the second side, and I'm going to have to open up the zipper to get at that second side because I have to flip it around. It just dawned on me, I forgot to mention, most zippers open from left to right. So when you're doing your fold, make sure that that's the way your zipper opens, unless, of course, you want it to open right to left. But typically, most zippers open left to right. So now I'll be right back. I measured right from the zipper teeth to the top fold, and it's exactly 3.5 inches. When I teach this in class around the country, a lot of times we don't have the luxury of time to do an exact measurement, but since I'm at home in my studio, I do. So the first edge I'm going to do is the one that is the zipper end. And I am going to stitch this. Now, I left my piping foot on. If you want to switch over to your standard foot, you certainly can. But the piping foot will still do the same job, and it saves changing feet. So I've got this all pinned. As I stitch and I go over the zipper tape, and especially across the zipper teeth, I want to be very careful to go slowly and allow the knife to cut off cleanly as I go across the teeth, and slow down a little bit just to give the needle a chance to get over those safely. So I'm going to do that first edge, and I'm doing this from the bottom to the top, just so that it is aligned correctly. And I don't have my knee lift on today because I have my camera set up and it would kind of be in the way. So I'm just going to skim off maybe about the width of the knife itself, hopefully. And just go along, and I haven't changed any of my settings because I think they'll be fine. And I'm going to slow down, and I want to hold the zipper tape, make sure it stays nice and flat as I go over it. Slow down a little bit, let that knife cut through. And now I can take off my first Wonder Clip. I love Wonder Clips because I don't have to worry about them nicking my knife. Chain off. I'll leave it chained so that I can tuck in those tails after I'm all done and use my knife cutter. So the first edge is done. It's clean. Now, because this side has a zipper pull on it, I don't want to cut that off. So I am going to open this up about halfway into the bag, just like that. And I'm going to take one more Wonder Clip, and just to hold the teeth together so that when I go to close it, I don't have any issues with getting it all positioned correctly. So I have one on the top, one on the bottom. Now, if you need, if you don't have a Wonder Clip and you need to pin it, that's fine. But just pin in far enough so that there's absolutely no way that your knife is going to nick the pins. So now we'll start from the top and go down to the bottom. And I'll just clear out my little scraps that are cut off. Get them out of the way. And again, I'll probably just trim off about, maybe about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit more. So I'll get it going. And I can take out that first clip. And if your edges are off a fraction of an inch, don't worry about it. That's not going to make any big difference. If they're really way off, then you want to make sure you correct it. But a fraction of an inch isn't going to affect it one way or the other. Use the cutter. And let's open up that zipper all the way and turn our bag right side out. So let's see what this looks like with it all zipped up. And we'll give it a nice press to smooth it out afterwards. It's so cute. I love it. I've got to get those corners turned out a little bit better, but it looks great. While I was off camera, I just took a double-eyed needle and turned the, I pulled the thread tails and the thread chain into the stitching and trimmed them off just to make sure that it looked neat on the inside. And this bag looks so cute, but you know, I think it needs one more thing. I think it needs a fun tassel as a pull for the zipper. So I am going to put on my Wonderful Dazzle thread, which is an 8-weight thread that has a little bit of sparkle in it, and I am going to make a tassel for this. So, and you know, you'll see the same technique that I used to make the tassel with a 3-thread rolled hem stitch on a quilted Christmas ball that I've done, and I'll be posting a photo of that as well. So I will be right back when I get my machine set up. So I'm going to run off a few yards of this. There's really nothing to it. There's no fabric, no cutting, no nothing as far as that goes. You just pull it running off a few yards of chain, and that's just a matter of how full a tassel you want and how long you want your tassel to be. And you'll want a little bit extra for, tying it up, and we'll go over all that in a few minutes. But you can see it's absolutely beautiful. This is the Wonderful Dazzle 8-weight, 2 8-weight threads and Serger cone thread in my right needle. So I'm going to continue running that off and give it a press also. That is key to making a really pretty looking tassel, because it smooths out any tiny little kinks in your chain. So I'll be back after I stitch off a few more yards. Thanks for joining me for the holiday edition of Serger Tip Clips. And if you have any questions about any of the techniques or you want any more information, be sure to send a question along. I'll be happy to answer them for you. Now I think it's time for me to open up this cool little zipper bag, pop in my napkins and my basket liner. And I think I'm going to put in a couple of candles as well for the table, since this is kind of a table themed gift. So stay safe and well, and we'll see you again soon.